it's me, Frauke, and in this video I want to talk about how I have healed physical pain by going into emotional pain. I'm gonna give you 3 examples of mine. Number 1 is a recurring urinary tract infection. Number 2 was really bad foot pain that I couldn't find a solution for. And number 3 is herpes on my chin. So let's dive right in. The first time I came across going into physical pain in order to go into emotional pain was in the summer of 2018. And that is where I stumbled across certain videos that I'm also gonna link in the description box, where I learned about methodologies to go into your physical pain. And I remember that day I wanted to meet with my best friend, and I woke up in the morning and I had such a strong burning in my urinary tract. I felt so restless, I literally thought about canceling the plans with my friend. I sat there, closed my eyes, and I went into that feeling, into that burning feeling. And I was just present with it. And I visualized how it looked like, what kind of color does it have? If it had a texture, what kind of texture would that be? Is it moving or is it still? And I was being really present with that pain. I was breathing continuously and continuously telling that pain, I'm here with you. And eventually it always transformed. This happened almost like 20 times throughout the process. The pain always transformed into something else. Then I was present with that for a while. Then that transformed. And I went deeper and deeper. And I remember back at that time I was living in an apartment where it was really noisy. So it was next to a street. There were lots of trucks and cars rushing by. And under the apartment I was living in, there was I don't know the English term, but like where they repair cars. It was really loud. But I was so focused and so present, I could hear these things, but they didn't really bother me at all. I could feel, there's actually a term for that, it's called bulbous tinea. It's when you feel really big and really small at the same time. Or you feel kind of weird, like I remember I felt like I was twisting to the side with my body even though I was sitting perfectly straight. So it makes the perception of your body a little bit skewed, and that happened about half an hour in. And that's actually a really good sign, because it means that your memories are shifting and you're going back to the original memory when you were a child. And that is the first point I want to speak about. That is also really important for the other 2 examples I brought you with. Everything that you experience, almost everything, you can track back to childhood. Up until the 7th or the 8th year, depends on the development of the child. This is where we perceive everything through an emotional lens. So we don't really have the capacity yet to, if mommy screams at us, we don't have the capacity to say, oh, it's because mommy had a bad day. We perceive it through this emotional lens. So up until this day, it is something we often can't rationalize, and we make it about ourselves. So for example, if mommy screams, it must be because I'm a bad child. And this is where the emotional trauma happens. And it was no different with the urinary tract infection. The deeper I went, the more I could feel it was anger. Like the restlessness and the burning, it was me being angry and feeling violated. And I could feel how I was a child. And eventually, even a visual memory came up when I would have to ask my mom how old I was, but I would say about 4 years old. We were on a vacation, and on that vacation I fell down stairs, 100 steps of stairs, and I fell down with my face first. Always dong, 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 and my mom was running behind me, always trying to grab me, but she was never fast enough. And by that time I had a really big egg here, and up until this day when I cry, this area of my skin gets red. And the visual memory was me sitting at the doctor in that vacation. I didn't have any context, I could just feel, I was really angry, I felt really violated, and I was sitting at that doctor's office. And that's it. And then at that point in time I knew my best friend, whom I actually wanted to cancel, but I looked at the clock and I was like, oh, she's gonna be here in 30 minutes. So that process took me about an hour, so I stopped the process there. That was 2018, and I've never had a urinary tract infection since. And when I stopped that process, the burning was completely gone. Notice that a lot of times they don't make rational sense. You just get emotions and you get certain snippets of memory, but that's okay, it's actually enough. Often you don't need the full mental understanding to heal. Which brings me to my second example. And since 2018, I always had really strong pain in my feet. It almost felt like there was a truck bulldozing over my feet. And they felt like they were about to burst because of that pressure. The pain was unbearable, and it also made me really restless, kind of like the restless leg syndrome, like I couldn't stay still because it was so painful. And eventually I took up the courage and I tried to go into that pain, and I tried many times, but the pain was often so strong I had to quit the process. But one time I had a breakthrough. So the same process like with the urinary tract infection, I concentrated on the pain, started breathing, started being present with that, telling my pain, I'm here with you. And eventually it transformed, and it felt like I was going deeper and deeper and deeper. And after about an hour, suddenly I had a smell in my nose that I haven't smelled in a really long time. And I just followed that sensation. It was also a feeling. And that smell brought me to a memory when I was at my cousin's house when I was a little child. I was there a lot because I was technically an only child, and my cousin, she had 2 siblings, so they were 3 children, and I would spend a lot of time there. Felt like my sister. And suddenly I remembered how I was being belittled in that family. Because I was the other child, and I think I was also a really quiet child. I was put down for that, like they would make fun of me, they would belittle me, they thought it's fun to make me the other child. That was kind of a style in that family. Suddenly I could feel the rage, like the anger of being so belittled and bulldozed, which explained the pain in my feet. And I allowed the child in that memory to take revenge, actually. I'm also gonna link something to that in the description box, if I can still find it online. I read that it's really important if your inner child has feelings of revenge to actually allow that. We often think that revenge is a bad thing, but it can be really healing in the safe realm of the mind to act out that revenge so that child can come out of the victim complex. And so I did just that. I let that child take revenge, and so she was really angry to all members of the family. And And she would get really violent, and I allowed it all. And eventually she broke down, like I could see in my inner eye how I broke down on the floor crying. And that's then where I took that child to a safe place to recover in my mind. There's a really good process for this. It's called the completion process by Teal Swan. I can really recommend this process, but there are probably other processes out there who similar do it. So you go into the pain, you resolve it, and then you bring the inner child to a safe place. And since then, that foot pain has lessened so much. Like sometimes I still feel a little bit of tension in my feet, so it's probably another layer of trauma, but it's almost gone, and it was unbearable to begin with. Alright, and so this brings me to the third example, and that was more recently. I had herpes on my chin. It started in 2019. That's the first time I had it. And at first I didn't even know it was herpes because I always thought herpes is at the lips. But I didn't really know it can be on your chin, and I thought those were pimples. I popped them, which if you know about herpes is probably one of the worst things you can do. And I still have a little bit of scars from that time because after 2 weeks I figured out it's herpes, and then it was already like kind of big. And after that, it always kind of came back. It's about the immune system. So when your immune system is weakened, you're more likely to get herpes again and again. And I just wanted to know what that was about because I read on, for example, Louise Hay, probably a term you've heard. If not, I'm going to link that in my description box as well. She talks also about how certain body parts and certain illnesses on certain body parts correlate to a certain emotion. And the chin is often related to, now I hope I'm gonna get it right, I should have researched this before doing the video, but it's often related to the reproductive organs and also the kidneys, I believe. And herpes on the chin is often related to shame. Herpes in general is related to shame. And so what I did here was, I had a little bit of an itching on my chin, but it was not enough pain to go into. So what I did here was a technique that's called parts work. I sat on a chair, sat down on a chair, braced myself, took a deep breath, and I said, I'm gonna take on my herpes. I'm gonna take on the part of my herpes. I breathed that in and just let that energy take over me. I know this sounds really fancy, but I'm also gonna link a description. I'm also gonna link something down in the description box. I explored how I felt. I offered presence to that feeling. I watched it transform. And then I asked myself questions. When was the first time I felt this way? What is coming up? And what was really interesting about my herpes was that I could feel how I was really young, like I'm talking about an infant, 1 year maybe or younger, and I could feel how I wanted a lot of closeness to my mom. And I didn't get enough. It was like I wanted all of that closeness, but I couldn't articulate it. I was really young, like maybe just half a year old. I remember feeling so ashamed. Suddenly I could remember how I felt so ashamed of that physical need of mine. And looking back, this insight was pivotal because it also changed the relationship to my sexuality, to my sexual and physical needs. Afterwards, I not only stopped having herpes, I also came face to face with my sexuality and certain physical needs that I have. It was not just that incident, but it kind of kick-started it. So I realized that I was often very ashamed of the things I needed physically, and I would not allow that in myself. And the more inner work I did with regards to that, and herpes was one of them, I realized I have to allow myself to have these needs met. And I realized I really have these needs for the first time anyway, you know. Yeah. So these were 3 examples, and if I would sum it up, there are probably a lot of processes and things you can find out there. But if I could sum it up, if you have a pain in your body, then that is inexplicable, you don't know where it's coming from, you're generally never wrong if you turn towards that pain instead of turning away from it. And it's a little bit scary to me too, even though I've done it multiple times, it's still just as scary as in the beginning. Because it sometimes feels like you're being swallowed by your pain, and then you have to let go and let that happen. Let it swallow you up. That's not easy. But yeah, it really pays off. You're gonna learn a lot about yourself, and it's really incredible to see how certain pains in your body correlate to emotional states. So yeah, thanks for listening, and I hope it helped a little bit, give you a little bit of insight, but I hope to see you again on this channel. Thank you.